Getting into the tabernacle itself, when they build the tabernacle, there's a veil, a curtain, a wall, if you will, around the outer court. And when you walk into the outer court, there's the brazen altar, and then there is the sea, the bronze sea, the laver, before you get into the actual kind of sanctuary itself. And what is it that we're to understand from, the construction of this outer court? What do we take from this? What do we learn from it?
There's a certain prescription for being in God's presence, and it requires you to be clean, and obviously that's a symbolic thing, but also requires a sacrifice. That obviously we look at as some sort of atoning sacrifice as well. But without those, you shouldn't be attempting to go into the presence of God.
I mean, obviously there's you say prescription, there's a plan. God determines it. So I had this image of a sifter, and only certain things get through. There's a process of getting into and closer, and you not only shouldn't, if you do, you end up dying if you're not allowed in those places. There's a process, and if you don't follow it, you end up being killed.
Yeah. One of the things that's fascinating is that people have looked at the design of the tabernacle and have seen in it hints that there's a vertical element to it, meaning as you go deeper into the sanctuary, you're going up in elevation. And one of the reasons that they see this is there's certain elements in the design of the tabernacle itself, but also then later when a permanent temple gets built, there's actually steps up. Yeah. And so one of the things that seems to be the case with the ancient worldview is that you had basically three components to reality, and these were seen in a vertical essence, a vertical nature. That you had the earth as the lowest point, you had the heavens as the highest point, and then you had the firmament standing in between those things. And this seems to correspond with the three basic areas of the tabernacle. You have the outer court, which is like the earth. You have the Holy of Holies, which is like the heavens where God lives. And then you have the firmament, the area in between, and that's where the priests do most of their work. So you have the holy place as the firmament. You have the outer court as the earth. You have the Holy of Holies as the heavens. Now, one of the things that's interesting is the place where you make your sacrifice is the earth then. Why do you think that is?
That's where the sacrifice can happen. You're not going to make a sacrifice in the place where God is because there's no sacrifice required in there. Perfection is already there. Being allowed in at the cost of a life or blood makes it possible for you to go from one place to the next.
Yeah. The earth is the place, really kind of the only place where the sacrifice can happen. Yeah. There's theologians who will talk about how Jesus had to become human so that he could suffer, because there's no suffering without flesh. Yeah. There's no suffering without him becoming human, and this is kind of instructive for us because really what it shows us is that the things that we've been talking about, it really gives reality to those things. That the idea that you cannot really sacrifice unless you've embodied something. So as an example, I can think about all kinds of things, and those are spiritual, right? My thoughts are spiritual. They don't have a physical reality to them. So I can think about all kinds. I can think about doing all kinds of good works. I can think about being nice to my neighbor. I can think about being patient while I drive. That's how far I can go with this. I can think about being nice to siblings. I can think about sharing my toys. If you're a little kid, I can think about all kinds of things. I can have the best intentions in the world, but that's not really a sacrifice. It isn't a sacrifice until you make it real. Because the thing is that on the earth is where things are in short supply. Like in our minds, there's Ferraris for everybody, right? in our minds, there's riches galore. In our minds, right, there's no limit to things. But on the earth, things are limited, things are dear, and pain happens, and time is limited, right? All these things that the earth is this place where sacrifice and valuing can really happen in a way that they can't happen in a spiritual sense. You understand what I'm saying by that, right? And so the bronze altar, the brazen altar, is the place where sacrifices happen, and it happens on the earth. Now, the other thing that kind of leads us to understand is the nature of what it is that we do sacrifice. And we sacrifice the physical self. The Bible talks about putting to death the flesh, right, or the deeds of the flesh. There's an element of it's the animal or fleshly or earthly self that has to be sacrificed. And so what is it exactly that it's getting at there? Should we learn that just all physical things are evil and need to be destroyed?
No.
No. That's a good answer.
Well, the physical is limited, and imperfect in its limitation. So ultimately, it must be dealt with and made glorious by its destruction for something better.
I think also it's not that the physical is evil, and there's been a variety of heresies that went down that road,
right.
But it's that it should be at all times subject to the spiritual.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the issue, is that the problem is that the physical wants to be on top. It wants to rule, and it wants to rule us. I mean, just think about being hangry, right? When you're so hungry that you're really short-tempered. Why should that make you more short-tempered? Well, because you want something. There's the physical is asserting itself. You get to the point where you have a choice. Am I going to sacrifice the physical for the spiritual, or am I going to sacrifice the spiritual for the physical? And we're faced with those choices more often than we would probably care to think about. So that's the realm that this takes place, and then beyond that you have the laver, which is the cleansing that needs to happen, and the cleansing seems to be twofold. That you're washing your hands and your feet mainly. And so what should we take from that?
The blood and the dirt is the blood on our hands, and the dirt of the earth. I mean, the sin that infects everything here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of a cleansing from the curse. If
The
you will,
curse,
the
that's
dust,
it.
Yeah.
dust on the ground, and but also, obviously, you're free to determine where you go, and your hands are what you work with.
Yeah.
And if those aren't sanctified, then you won't go to the right places or do the right things.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really interesting is the blood on our hands seems to be kind of dealing with our neighbor, and the curse of the dust seems to be dealing with the things that we're supposed to have dominion over. And it's not hard to see that we have problems in those areas, and that the cleansing is required if we're going to be close to God. I mean, and the thing is, we can say, well, I've never murdered anybody, so I don't have blood on my hands. And it's Jesus puts that to rest, right?
No
When
kidding.
he says, don't be angry with your
Right.
brother, otherwise you're guilty of murder. So if you've never been angry with anybody, then sure, you're fine. But if you have been, then you need the cleansing. And the other thing is that the dust of the ground seems to be associated with the fact that we should have dominion over the earth, and that we don't take proper dominion over the earth, that we don't. In the Bible, being given a position of authority, having dominion over something, is not some kind of opportunity for graft. However, it almost always is in the world. Go to a third world country, and the reason it's a third world country is because at every level of the hierarchy, that's the way that it's seen. It's an opportunity to take advantage of the thing that's below you. the way that God intended it is that everything that's put in your dominion is to be taken care of by you, is to be watched over by you, is to be glorified by you. And, you know, who can say that they've done that? Who can say that, you know, the things that have been put into their care, that they have just been perfect in the way that they've looked out for, glorified. Nobody's perfect in the way that they've cultivated those things that are put underneath them. And so that's, you know, that's certainly something that needs to be cleansed. And if you're not, what right do you have to stand in God's presence? What right do you have to acclaim on some kind of authority or dominion if you've the dominion that you've been given, you haven't done the right thing with?
Right.